Hi everybody, my name is John Spritzler. I'm the author of two recent books. One is called No Rich and No Poor, The Populist Goal We Can and Must Win. The other book is called Divide and Rule, The Right versus Left Trap. And these books come out of my experience in trying to build what I call an egalitarian revolutionary movement to remove the rich from power, to have real, not fake democracy with no rich and no poor. I'd like to share with you my experiences and some knowledge I've gained that I think is extremely important for people to know who are trying to remove the rich from power and to have real, not fake democracy with no rich and no poor. Um, so first of all, let me just say I'm a 70-year-old retired senior research scientist, worked 20 years at the Harvard School of Public Health in Boston, which is where I now live. And I've been editing the sister websites, pdrboston.org and newdemocracyworld.org, which have been, for the last 20 years or so, advocating, at least in the latter website is the older one, advocating trying to create a truly equal and democratic society and defeating the wealthy class that obviously opposes that. So first of all, I'd like to let you know that I have a button I wear which you can't read too well, but the image of the button is behind me. And I've done some interesting things with that button I want to tell you about. The button says, let's remove the rich from power, have real, not fake democracy with no rich and no poor, and then the URL for the website, pdrboston.org, that I edit. And on the lower left, you can see what it's hard to make it out, but those are signatures to a statement that I'll tell you about in a little bit. So the first thing I want to say is that about more than 80%, often more than 90% of the random people that I have and others have asked about this button, we show them the button, we hand them the button. Random people in public places, sidewalks, supermarkets, sometimes door to door. We ask people, what do you think about the message on this button? Good idea or a bad idea? Well, everywhere we've gone, now I haven't gone to Beverly Hills, that's true, but 5 representative neighborhoods of Boston on the sidewalk, Bernie Sanders rallies, up in New Hampshire, conservative little rural towns where the people listen to Rush Limbaugh, not NPR, and a pro-Trump rally of the people who came in mainly from Western Massachusetts to rally in front of the State House in support of the Second Amendment, which was being whittled away by a recent act by the Attorney General in Massachusetts. So let me tell you that when I ask other people, when we ask random people, what do you think about the message on this button? Let's remove the rich from power, have real, not fake democracy with no rich and no poor. Good idea or bad idea? It's always 80% or more, and as I said, often in the 90s, that people say, yes, it's a good idea or a great idea. This was true at the Trump rally, which, by the way, was several hundred people, all white, most of them wearing Trump, Let's Make America Great Again, those red caps. Many of them flying, holding American flags. and wearing t-shirts and stuff with the NRA insignia. I randomly picked 50 people. I tapped them on the shoulder and asked them the question. 86% of them agreed with the button, and many of them took the button and pinned it on themselves right on the spot. Now, there was another small remaining percent who, some of whom were hostile, quite hostile verbally, not physically, and some of whom said, I don't know what I think. But 86% were extremely positive about that message, which is the message of egalitarian revolution. And this is what most people would say is, you know, the hard right. Same response among the people at a Bernie Sanders rally during the summer. Same response up in New Hampshire in the town of Unity, and another similar town, very small conservative town where people listen to Rush Limbaugh, not NPR, as I said. The point I'm making is that we've been divided into apparently hostile conservative and progressive camps, but in both of those camps, the majority of people want egalitarian revolution. They want what this button calls for. When I went to the neighborhoods in Boston, and I shot videotapes of this, which are on my PDR website, the pdrboston.org website, 91% of the random people on the sidewalks thought the button's idea was a good or a great idea. 91%. This is black people, white people, Hispanics, a few Muslim people, you know, wearing the Muslim dress. This is an extremely popular idea. Now, most people, however, unfortunately, don't know that this is an extremely popular idea. They think that, you know, they think personally it's a good idea, but they think probably very few other people agree with them. The ruling class has made it its number one strategy of social control, making sure that people who want to remove them from power and have no rich and no poor and real, not fake democracy are paralyzed by hopelessness from thinking that there's such a tiny minority in the country that it would be pointless to even talk about making such a revolution, never mind seriously trying to organize a movement for it. That's the situation we're in. It's even worse. Let me give an example. I was well, not recently now, it was a couple of years ago, I think. There was a big rally in downtown Boston of the people for a $15 an hour minimum wage. So I went to the rally, and I was collecting signatures, which we have thousands of signatures now for a statement called This I Believe. Now, let me read to you what the statement says, and then you'll have an appreciation for the significance of the fact that so many people sign it. The statement says, "To my neighbors near and far, this I believe. Something is very wrong about our society today. It should be based on the golden rule, do unto others as you would have others do unto you. But instead, it is based on the opposite. He who has the gold makes the rules. The ones with the gold celebrate greed and looking out for number one. They destroy the environment for personal gain, like BP did to the Gulf. And they pit people against each other to control them. In the United States, we have a fake democracy. Big money owns the media and political parties, controls the electoral process and politicians, and determines government policies, which have nothing to do with campaign promises or what most people want This is not right. Our capitalist economy is based on and perpetuates enormous economic inequality. Most people are merely hired hands, working for and required to obey employers who claim, illegitimately, to personally own the earth's land and minerals as well as the material and intellectual wealth produced by millions of working people. The poorest people do the hardest work and enjoy the benefits of socially produced wealth the least. The richest do the easiest work in great luxury or do no work at all and enjoy the lion's share of these benefits. This is wrong. We, the undersigned, want a democracy and an economy based on equality and concern for one another and for generations yet unborn. I'm reading it on a poster above me, so excuse me here. Laws should only be made by meetings at the local level open to all who support equality and democracy. Social order on a larger scale, such as complex economic coordination, should be achieved by voluntary federation of local communities and workplaces, not by laws written by so-called, quote, representatives in distant capital cities or by commands from CEOs imposed from above. We should all equally own and enjoy the benefits of the earth's resources and the wealth that we produce by working together, with nobody being rich or poor. The principle of our economy should be from each according to ability to each according to need. A golden rule idea as old as the Bible, Acts 4:34-35. Work should be for shared goals, to produce things that people need and want to share freely, not buy and sell. A greedy, rich, and powerful minority who were never elected and therefore cannot be unelected prevents Americans from making ours a more equal and democratic society, which is why we need a revolution to remove them from power. Well, when I and others have shown this statement to people and asked them to sign it if they agree with it, overwhelmingly people say, "Where do I sign?" People's face lights up in a smile for reading something that they agree with so much but hardly ever have seen elsewhere. So as I was saying, I went to the rally for the $15 an hour minimum wage, and I took this statement around, and literally everyone I showed it to signed it. And they were all listening to the speeches of the people giving the speeches at the rally. And none of the speeches came even close to saying the egalitarian revolutionary things that this statement said that everyone signed in agreement with. Now that's a curious thing. You have a crowd of people who want egalitarian revolution, and their leaders, the people who are giving the speeches, are absolutely silent about that aspiration. And here's the other curious thing. The people in the crowd did not think it was wrong for the leaders to be silent about their egalitarian revolutionary aspirations. They thought it was wise for their leaders to be silent about it. Why? Well, the reason is this. Like most people, the people in the crowd think that if you say that you want to remove the rich from power and have no rich and no poor, that's so radical it'll scare away support that you're having so much trouble getting from the general public. People think that you'll lose support if you say what you really want. But I've gone and made these videos I mentioned earlier where I have specifically wanted to find out what the truth is about this question. I have asked people on the street, random people, not only what they think about the button, and 91% thought it was a good idea or a great idea, as some people said. But then I asked them the follow-up question. I asked them if an organization that was for something that you thought was a good idea, like improving conditions for people who work, you know, raising the wages of people who work and so forth. I said, if you thought that one of these organizations, if you heard that they were sincerely in favor of what egalitarian revolution is, would you support them more or less? Almost everyone said they'd support the organization more, not less. The fact of the matter is that if an organization were to advocate egalitarian revolution, it would increase its support from the general public, not decrease. But practically nobody knows this. Practically everybody, like the people in the $15 an hour rally, believe that they dare not mention that they want egalitarian revolution. And this is why there's not a single progressive organization that's large enough to talk about that advocates egalitarian revolution, even though its membership would love an egalitarian revolution. Nobody talks about it. Everybody's afraid. And this is because the ruling class has succeeded in making it seem as if hardly anybody is for removing the rich from power, to have no rich and no poor. And they've succeeded in getting this big lie across because they control not only the mass media, but the alternative media, which gets its money directly or indirectly from big money. So, for example, I made videos of these 5 neighborhoods in Boston asking people on the street what they think about the button's message. And I and others, friends of mine, we went to the Democracy Now!, Amy Goodman's radio show website, and proposed as an idea, because they solicit ideas for new shows and stories, that they go around the country interviewing people with the same question. What do you think? Good idea or bad idea to remove the rich from power, of real not fake democracy, no rich and no poor, and videotape it and let the new Democracy Now! Audience hear how people respond to that. They'd certainly be interested in knowing. She won't do it. She didn't even reply. Democracy Now! Is not in the business of giving people confidence that they are part of the majority in wanting egalitarian revolution. Democracy Now!, and this is why it gets big money funding, is in the business of first capturing the audience as its audience, the people who are most inclined to want to build an egalitarian revolutionary movement, the people who are most fed up and disgusted and angry at the crimes and so forth of the American ruling class. So to capture that audience, it has content which is about how bad the American ruling class is and how nasty it is and so forth. That's how it captures its radically inclined audience. Once it has that audience, its mission is to make sure that those people are neutralized, prevented from being a threat to the ruling class, specifically to make sure that those people are prevented from advocating removing the rich from power, to make sure that those people are afraid of even saying that they're for that, to make sure that those people, that their energy is all used for Band-Aid solutions on the grounds that you dare not ask or talk about anything more than a Band-Aid solution because that'll scare your support away from the general public. And this is the situation we're in today. Now, on the other hand, you've got the people, the 86% of the people at the Trump rally who were very enthusiastic about what the button says. I mean, one woman, it was a very hot day, and one woman had bottles of cold water, and she, insisted on giving me a bottle of cold water to express her appreciation for what I was doing. These people are in organizations which are designed to suppress the idea of egalitarian revolution and to unite people who are for it, which is 86% at this rally, with the people who are totally against it, the 8%, and it puts them in the same organization. In this case, the organization's name was Gun Owners Action League in Massachusetts. And in these organizations, the leadership manages to obscure the fact that most of the people in it want egalitarian revolution, and a tiny minority are opposed to it. And it obscures that fact by only talking about something which both sides agree on, which is the right to bear arms. And so the people in the organization, GOAL, they don't even know that there's a fundamental conflict in the membership of the organization about being for or opposed to egalitarian revolution. The other thing that happens in the right is that the main organizations present themselves as being the true defenders of capitalism. They're not at all critical of class inequality, and they suppress any discussion along those lines. So they'll gain support by telling people that they agree with them about various social issues, but it's all for the purpose of channeling people's anger at the liberal position on those social issues into implicit support for capitalism and class inequality. So what we have is a situation where what most people want, be they conservative or progressive in the way they describe themselves, is never articulated. And people are made to think that they dare not say what they really want. And people are made to accept that the best that they can hope for is various Band-Aid solutions. And that's what the Bernie Sanders and Jill Stein platforms are. They're Band-Aid solutions. They're essentially like FDR's New Deal. Now, FDR's New Deal, what did it lead to? Well, it led to exactly what we have today: enormous class inequality, Goldman Sachs on the one hand, and people underwater on their home mortgages, if not homeless, on the other hand. How many times do we have to let the ruling class persuade us to leave the rich in power and be satisfied with the latest version of the New Deal? The ruling class basically wants us to remain on the treadmill of defeat. The treadmill of defeat is exemplified by the fact that we've had movements that have explicitly aimed to win certain important reforms, and they have won those reforms. I'll cite the civil rights movement aimed to abolish Jim Crow, and it succeeded. The labor union aimed to win the right to form a labor union legally, and it succeeded. The anti-Vietnam War aimed to get the U.S. to withdraw from Vietnam, and it succeeded. And going abroad. The anti-South Africa apartheid movement aimed to abolish apartheid there, and it succeeded. So movements can win often what they aim explicitly to win when they're fighting against the established power. But they never win more than what they explicitly aim to win. And that is what keeps us on the treadmill of defeat. Because if they don't aim to remove the rich from power, the rich remain in power, and they take back whatever we win or neutralize it in some fashion. So, for example, the civil rights movement abolished Jim Crow, but now we have the new Jim Crow of racist prison incarceration, which began to be implemented right after the old Jim Crow was abolished. Labor unions are now legal, but they're controlled by the upper class, and they're used to sabotage any serious strikes of American workers. The anti-Vietnam War movement won, and we've had nothing but more warmongering since then. And in South Africa, apartheid is gone, but the same corporate elite is in power. They might use black politicians now, which they didn't before, but it's the same corporate elite that's in power. And class inequality has actually, according to many sources, gotten worse. And the violence and the material impoverishment of black working class people, the black majority in South Africa, is arguably worse now than even during the years of apartheid. So this is what I mean when I say we're remaining on the treadmill of defeat. The only way to get off the treadmill of defeat is to explicitly aim to get off that treadmill of defeat. And that means we have to have an explicit, widely shared, and by that I mean by hundreds of millions of people in the United States, and as well as other countries elsewhere, we have to have a widely shared vision of what it means to get off the treadmill of defeat. What would have to happen to make that really true? And this means a vision of what is egalitarian revolution? What is egalitarianism? What do we want? It's not enough to just have a list of things we don't like. You know, college students don't like being totally in debt, and working people don't like, you know, the good jobs being outsourced. There's a whole list of things we don't want. But we need to know what we want. And that's what I wrote my book about, called No Rich and No Poor, on Amazon. And we need to understand how to create unity around what we really want that unites the people who listen to conservative talk radio with the people who listen to NPR. And that's what my second book, called Divide and Rule, is about. They're both at Amazon. And they're both really cheap on the Kindle, $2.99. So I'm really trying to persuade people to read these books, because I think we need a movement, which is what the books are about, how we can build it. We can't build the kind of movement that we need unless we're consciously trying to do it. And we can't consciously be trying to do it if we think it's impossible to begin with. And so that's why it's so absolutely crucial that people learn that they're surrounded by huge numbers of people who want egalitarian revolution, even though they've never heard that way of expressing it before, but who love what the button says. And even though most people think it's impossible for it to happen because they think that too few people want it, if we start building a movement that demonstrates the enormous amount of support for that goal, we'll be able to build that movement. And when that movement is very large, and very determined to grow stronger and to win, that's when it becomes possible to actually persuade a critical mass of people in the military forces to refuse orders that they will certainly get at some point, to refuse such orders to attack the revolutionary movement and to use their weapons to defend the movement against those who would attack it violently. This is possible. It requires building a large movement that explicitly aims for what people already today want, but don't know that they're in a majority in wanting it. This is a kind of a movement that can win the critical mass of soldiers to come over to its side, and that's how the rich lose power. It's not by voting. I mean, the election system, let's face it, has always been used since the time of the founding fathers as a method of controlling the population, of making it seem that the ruling elite somehow are acting with the permission of the vast majority of people because supposedly they want a fair election and so forth and so on. The election system was never set up to allow people to remove the rich from power. The history shows that over and over again. What the ruling class wants us to do is to be constantly trying to get this or that person elected because of some New Deal Band-Aid reform or something. Because the ruling class knows that as long as we're busy trying to get someone elected, we're busy not building an egalitarian revolutionary movement. And the ruling class has been doing this successfully for literally centuries. So the key, as I said, is for people to know they're not alone in wanting egalitarian revolution. So how can you, an individual, find out that you're not alone? And the answer is you can get a PDR button, or a couple or more, to do what I've been doing and other people have been doing, which is to show the button to random people and just ask them whether they think it's a good or a bad idea. Or you can just take a 3x5 card and write, "Let's remove the rich from power, have real not fake democracy with no rich and no poor," and show them the 3x5 card. It doesn't have to be PDR button. And to give you a sense of how easy it is to find out, to do this reality checking, let me tell you some of the things that I've done. You've heard me say that I've gone to supermarkets and in other towns and sidewalk, and that's a bit ambitious. That takes time out of your life. But here's how to do it without taking any time out of your life. Wear the button, put a few in your pocket or purse or backpack, and when you're doing chores, when you're doing shopping, show the button to the person who's working the cash register when you check out your groceries. Show the button to the bank teller when you're making a deposit. Show the button to the person, if you're old like me, you get prescription drugs. Show it to the person who hands you the prescription drugs from the other side of the counter. Show the button to the sales clerk in a store. Show the button to the person who delivers your mail, to the person who brings the UPS packages. Show the button to the person who brings the Amazon deliveries. Show the button to anyone that you happen to run into in the course of shopping or just doing errands, or people you work with or fellow students. Doesn't take any extra time out of your day. None at all. And it's fun. You might not know it's fun until you do it, but believe me, it's fun because the positive response you're going to get from people is going to make your day. People's face will light up with a smile when they read the button. You know, at first they don't believe it. They've never seen anything say it so directly and clearly, and something that they would like to see happen so much. Um, when people start doing this with the button or with a 3x5 card, I don't care, you will be changed. Instead of being a person who might wish that most other people supported egalitarian revolution, or a person who maybe hoped that most other people did, or a person who maybe based on some theory theorized that they would, not to mention a person based on listening to all the media that we're subjected to who is quite sure that most people will be against the button, you will be changed into a person who knows that you are surrounded by fellow egalitarian revolutionaries. You will know it the way you know that if you drop a stone, it's going to fall down and not up. That kind of certainty. And that's the kind of certainty that makes it possible for people to take the next steps to build the egalitarian revolutionary movement by doing things that make sense, which my book discusses some of them, ultimately to create large organizations that advocate it, unlike the organizations today that are afraid to advocate it. And that's how you end up creating a situation where the soldiers realize that yes, it's very risky to refuse orders. In fact, you could get severely punished for refusing orders, even executed for treason in some circumstances. But when the soldiers realize that if they go over to the revolutionary side, there's a very good chance they're going over to the winning side, because the movement is so large and so determined and is so inspired by knowing what it's for and having thought about it and read about it and discussed it to know that it's very possible, very desirable, which is what my book is designed to help people discover, then we can really change the world. But it starts with finding out that you're not alone, by showing the person who rings up your groceries the button and saying, what do you think? It's that simple. It's cheap, it's legal, it's fun, and it doesn't take any extra time out of your life. And now I'd like to just add a little point. We have a problem in people who are trying to talk about the big picture, which is that, you know, so many of them say, well, we need socialism. And boy, is that a turnoff to so many people. Understandably, it's a turnoff. Good people are turned off by it. Because what do people think of when they hear the word socialism? I know some Bernie Sanders people have learned to live with it and learned to think, well, you know, it means a New Deal and things will be better. But the fact is that there are socialist parties in the world that occasionally have taken power. Until just recently, the Socialist Party was in power in France. Hollande was the president, and the socialists had a majority in parliament. And Socialist Party is reviled by the working class in France. It was horrible what the socialist government did to workers. By the way, it also banned demonstrations in support of Palestinian human rights. In Greece, the Socialist Party, but before the Spiros one, the one I have trouble pronouncing, was headed by the man who was also the head of the Socialist International. And it was enforcing austerity to make sure the banks would get paid the money that they claimed the working class owed them unjustly. it was enforcing horrible austerity. The 3/4, I think, of the Greek population were demanding that the socialist uh, president, or prime minister, I forget which office, step down. This is discussed in my book. And the Spiros, or the one that I have trouble pronouncing, organization is just as bad. It's been enforcing austerity. Uh, the communists are notoriously anti-democratic. I discuss this in my book, and I discuss why. It's because the theory, the Marxist science that they are acting on the basis of, uh, is that uh, is that a classless society, what they call communism with a small c, will arrive as in spite of the fact that ordinary working class people don't want it, in spite of the fact that ordinary working class people just think with their belly and don't want a classless society. And it is the role of the Communist Party, which supposedly does want a classless society, to socially engineer people so that one day in the future they'll become, as Che Guevara put it, socialist man and socialist women. But they're not that today, so they cannot be allowed to have a real say in society. And that is why communist governments are notoriously anti-democratic. Well, the egalitarian idea is that we should make society be the way most people want it to be, and that's why we need real democracy, so that the vast majority of people are the ones who are calling the shots. But so what we have is a situation where a lot of good people who want to talk about a big change, not just a Band-Aid change, say, well, we need socialism. And then other people hear them say that and say, oh no, this person's for some big government that's just going to boss me around in the name of the working class, just like all the other governments boss me around. No thanks. Or this person's really a communist, is going to set up a dictatorship of some communist party over me. No thanks. So it's very divisive. Ruling class loves for people who want a big change to call themselves socialists and communists, because it knows how divisive that is and how it basically keeps such people isolated from the majority of people. So I hope some of these comments are useful. I certainly hope that if you are intrigued by anything I said, you'll go to Amazon, go under my name, John Spritzler, and look for No Rich and No Poor, and Divide and Rule, the two recent books, and see what you think, and let's get this egalitarian revolutionary movement on the road. Thank you. Goodbye.